Welcome to today's interview on Brighteon.com. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon, and you may have heard me talk about that I use it's called a Micro-Impact plate called the JUVENT system. I've been using it since 2016. I use it every day. And it provides a really critical form of what you might call kinetic nutrition, in a sense, to your body, your bones, your joints, connective tissue. And I found it to be really revolutionary, and I've introduced this to a lot of other people. Now, we're going to be joined here in just a second by the president of JUVENT, Pete Simonson, and the website is juvent.com, Juvent. But I do want to disclose that since then, he has become a sponsor of Brighteon.tv. So there is that relationship. He helps support the Brighteon TV broadcasts. But I got to say, this specific interview is not a specially paid interview. This is not like he didn't pay me to come on today. I invited him on because I know that a lot of people, they were very sedentary during COVID, and they're trying to restore their fitness and their health and their bone density and all these things that matter. And I know that Pete Simonson can talk about these things because his background is in medical device engineering, and he himself is quite an accomplished inventor. So welcome to the show today, Pete. It's great to have you on.
Thanks so much, Mike. This is a pleasure to be here and an honor.
Well, I'm really happy to have you on. Thank you again. And your technology, your JUVENT plate devices, which I want to show people just what it looks like. I'm on your website. Here it is. Here's what the plate looks like. And you just stand on it for a few minutes a day, 10 minutes per day. I use it from 10 to 20 minutes. And it's remarkable. It is not a vibration plate with a big vibration. It's a micro-impact plate. Pete, can you explain the difference, what this does that is not that common?
Yeah, so the difference is basically it's safe. It's a safe way of giving skeletal metabolism, exercising skeletal metabolism without damaging the rest of the body. And it turns out when you dig down in the science and you do that, it's a very tough task to do. And what the team, the developers that did with JUVENT is really pulled it all together that allowed somebody to stand on a platform and safely get skeletal exercise to help skeletal metabolism. And so it's very different than these high energy plates. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later because a lot of these plates just shake people way too much.
Yeah, we're showing that right now. Whole body vibration is really can be rather violent shaking. What you offer in contrast to that is a micro-impact.
Yeah, the movement of a JUVENT platform is about the height of a human hair. That's how mild it is. And when people get on it for the first time, they're actually underwhelmed. But there's a reason for that because, you don't have to go with the simple more is better because it's not. And the science has shown, and we'll talk about this, how the bone can get its work done with with micro impact. And that's a big difference. And a lot of that is done with software, precision machining, and it has over 18 patents.
In fact, this is one of the things that really impresses me about your company. You've also gone to great lengths to source parts from the United States. Your product is made in the United States. It's been engineered and designed, of course, in the United States. I'm showing on the screen here some of what goes into it. And I understand that over the last, 18 months or so, you've really expanded your production lines in the United States. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have historically been as U.S. sourced as we could be. And when COVID was starting to kick in and I saw the supply lines getting disrupted, I said, scour our bill of materials list and look for anything that comes from outside. And we found two or three really small components, and we sourced the heck out of them. And since then, we're engineering even those out to use more U.S.-based products. But we do everything in-house, the CNC machining. We do all the assembly, the final assembly, the development, and even the outside stuff we source that all locally as well.
Okay. And the company JUVENT ships, of course, from the U.S., from your facility, and you're shipping all over the world, I take it.
That's correct. We do. And we're keeping up with demand because, it's as a small manufacturer, it's a tough balancing act between supply, demand, and your capabilities. But what we have done is we've taken this last year's disruption in terms of the logistical chain. And we've inventoried up, and we've thrown out the rule book of just-in-time inventory and really made ourselves more robust, because there could be another disruption down the pike, and we're ready for it this time. And I think for your viewers, the disruption may be in the form of pharmaceutical meds. And I think when we'll connect the dots on how that having a Juvent might help one weather that storm a little bit better.
Okay, yeah, good point. Now, I understand you have a few slides to share with us as well. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to interrupt you probably constantly through these slides and ask questions or comments, but you want to start with the first one, which I think is about your background.
Yeah. So what I did, Mike, I brought slides today that I would show to a medical doctor, PhD, ND, you name it. And I've never had anybody look at it and say, wow, that's not amazing. And we can go through them quickly, but I encourage you to stop, because I love getting questions, because I want to be clear, because the message is solid. And the more you understand it, the more excited you get about it. So my background is, I have an academic background in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech. And I, soon after college, went into selling spinal implants. And part of that was watching these surgeries over and over again and saying, hey, I think I can build a better mousetrap. And I did. And fast forward, I sold the technology back to Medtronic, and it became one of the largest selling spine systems in the world. And I traveled the world teaching spine reps and spine surgeons in probably 49 states and over 30 countries. And so I was in the middle of it. The product became so successful, Medtronic, the largest medical device maker in the world, awarded me the Technical Contributor of the Year award. And I'm proud of that. But the germane part of that to this is that I know how to put things in context. And Juvent, when I first learned about it, I didn't realize how significant it was. And it was way more than I think even the founders thought. And that's what I'd like to do today, is explain that and fast forward that, because there's no reason that people can't put this to work in their lives.
Okay, let's do that. Go to the next slide. But just what you're establishing, your background is mechanical engineering and spinal implants. So you know about the intersection of technology, mechanical phenomenon with the spinal cord, and also, just the skeletal system. And the skeletal system, I think our audience is pretty sophisticated. They know it's not just like dead, dry bones in your body. No, they're living tissue. They produce blood. They have their own metabolism. It's critical that your bones get proper, quote, exercise in order to function. Or, look what happens when they send astronauts out to space. The bones start, dissolving away. They can't even stand. They can't walk when they come back to Earth, So you want to say anything else about the skeletal system before we move on?
Yeah, I've got a great slide on that. But
okay.
One of the that's interesting, Mike, is after we did the spinal implants, my brother and I, we were putting together a clinic that was, we had put together a biotech company that had found the source of biologically identifying the source of joint pain. And in that, we went deep into the biotech world. And it was really an amazing wake-up call for us to see how far ahead science is ahead of medicine. And so we were putting together a clinic that was using all this. And today we would call it a functional med clinic, but we were 12 years ahead of our time and no one knew what we were talking about. But we started studying all these various technologies, and that's where we saw Juvent. And we did about a month of due diligence on Juvent. Then we started realizing, and I thought, wait a minute, if I do a clinic, I can help a couple thousand people. If I use Juvent to reverse osteoporosis, which was the goal at the time, that's 40 million people. So we put all those projects on the back burner and said, let's focus on Juvent. And what we didn't realize is it was the tip of the iceberg. And the first clue we got was actually when we had a borrowed platform, because the company's founder had died, the company went dormant. My mother was suffering from an unfused pelvic fracture, which was taking a vertical person and turning into a horizontal person stuck on opioids.
Wow.
And we said, Mom, why don't you try this platform? We got it for a few weeks. And in about 2 weeks, my mom went from in bed 22 hours a day to up with no cane and no pain.
Wow.
And we were like, wait a minute. And so we had to give the platform back, as it was from an osteoporosis patient, and she went right back down. And she called me up on the phone in a very sincere way that she said, Peter, I don't know what you're going to do with that company, but I need one of those platforms. And so I said, Mom, well, they don't build them anymore. And I scoured for weeks and found one in Canada from a guy whose mom had died. He didn't even know what it did. I said, I'll take it. Well, my mom, the rest is history. She just celebrated her 90th birthday. She was 78 at the time and was getting ready to go into a nursing home. And she still lives independently in a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom house with a guest house and a pool, and has no intentions of leaving. And I attribute that to Juvent. And since then, I've seen so many people of older age put their activity level back 5, 10, 20 years.
And mobility is absolutely critical as people age. If you lose mobility, then you lose self-reliance.
Absolutely.
Then you have to go in, maybe a nursing home or some kind of setting, or you have to have people come visit you and help you with everything. If you can stay mobile, your quality of life, it's like, night and day. If you can stay mobile, life is good.
Absolutely. And when we stop moving, we stop living. And for a lot of people, it's a fall. It results in a fractured hip.
Right.
And Juvent helps prevent that through 2 mechanisms of action. We'll talk about that.
Okay, yeah, let's proceed. Go ahead with the slide.
My original goal was helping 40 million people with osteoporosis. And now I look with 10, 12 years experience in this, my estimation is we can help 300 million people add 5 years to their health span. And that's a bold statement, and I'll back it up all day long. So
all right.
Hold me to that task.
Okay.
So we'll talk a little bit about who and what Juvent is, the physiology, the patients, and a little bit about the technology. But the physiology is really the most interesting part of it. A quick disclaimer, Juvent is considered investigational for osteoporosis and improvement of bone health, and our claims have not been reviewed by the FDA to treat any condition. So after having said that, let's get on with it and see what we found. Juvent is essentially a platform you set as you stand on it. It creates micro-impact, and micro-impact is extremely low. And there's a reason we talk about is safety. But the good news is the engineers found that if they use the right frequency, i.e. resonance, that they can use that small amount of energy so efficiently that they don't need the big shakers. And a PhD in controls engineering got 3 patents on that alone. And engineering controls people, they're like gurus. I mean, that's really beyond all of us. It's fascinating. The treatments are about 10 minutes long, and it's simple to use, but there's nothing simple about it. There's been over 45 million in R&D. There's over 90 published papers and 20 patents, and it's really not like anything else. And so that's part of our job, is to help distinguish between a Juvent Micro-Impact and these things that called whole body vibration. They're just a different league. This is a slide from this is a quote from the clinical founder of one of the largest physical therapy centers in the country. And the reason I show this to clinicians is if somebody walks in, using Juvent is the rule, not the exception. It's one of these things that we'll find out why later, but most people are not getting enough impact in their life. And when they come to physical therapy, they're usually recovering from a surgery, a fall, and that sort of thing. And Juvent becomes an enormous catalyst to their healing. And we have so many stories. We're in hundreds of PT clinics around the country. And when the PTs get it, they get their patients on it. They just have what we call the Juvent moment. It goes from the head to the heart. And then they just become eager to get their patients on it.
Yeah, you would think physical therapists everywhere would absolutely love this technology. And it sounds like the ones that know about it do love it.
It's true. And it's just a learning curve. And once they get it, they're on their way.
Mm-hmm.
And so us as a company, we've worked with some, pretty impressive institutions around the world in different relationships with their funding, co-studies, and that sort of thing. And but we're in the middle of it. We're still working with a lot of these people, and we're researching many more clinical indications that we see people improving from. And we have overwhelming anecdotal reports from people all over the country, and they live thousands of miles apart, describing how this other condition that they've been on, that has improved since they've been on Juvent. And it's kind of fun when you start digging into the science on it, you start finding that it's generally the skeletal metabolism. And the crazy part is, Mike, The skeleton is the second most important organ system, and it has no medical specialty.
Interesting. Wow.
So, generally science leads medicine by 20 years. But in this case, there's nobody on the clinical side even looking to monitor the science to make it active. So what we have to do is educate really, both the clinicians and the patients.
Yes.
We have a very impressive medical advisory board. And the reason I point this out is because when these people are the top in their field, when they look at the science behind JUVENT, they say, sign me up. Scott Bowden is the vice chairman of orthopedics at Emory. Robert Sheeler was the 16-year Mayo Clinic newsletter editor who's licensed in 6 disciplines. And so you can't have a better vetting than that. And so the other thing that helps us is when people have questions that we can't answer, we've got a very deep well to draw from to give them guidance. So let's talk about the physiology and kind of how this thing does works its magic. So we've known for over 100 years that bone grows where bone is loaded. It's called Wolff's Law. But we now know in the last only 20 or 30 years that bone distinguishes between impact and non-impact loading. So lifting a weight is very different than a walking step because the impulse is very different. And the bone can use both of them, but it requires an impact load to get most of its cellular work done. And we'll see in a few slides, that's a big deal. Now, cell transfer is the study of what a cell lets in and what a cell lets out at the wall. And so they've identified that it's called mechanotransduction, and it's part of mechanotherapy. And the body uses that mechanical load to get its cellular work done. And that's one of the reasons why walking is such a miracle. And you see all these studies about how walking improves so many things in people's lives, but you don't see that about swimming and bicycling because it's the impact loading that's one of the key ingredients. And that's one of the things JUVENT is very gracefully, if you call it biohacking, you might call it, but gracefully enables this cellular activity in a very short period of time and doing it safely. This is a great slide. So you see that guy's hand on the left and that guy's hand on the right?
Yeah.
You see the size difference?
Is that the same guy?
It's not only the same guy, it's the same guy at the same time.
What?
Exactly.
Because what is he? Is he a quarterback throwing a football or something? What does he do with the hand?
He's a professional tennis player.
Tennis.
And so I came across this guy. I read hundreds of articles, and I saw that's it. That in one picture. Because what's amazing about this is that it's the same person, same biology, same everything, except the dominant hand, in this case, the right hand, is the one hitting the racket. And you see the same thing in the arm. And so what you're seeing is a visual verification of the accrued effects of impact loading on skeletal metabolism. That's a mouthful, but it's a really, really important point.
And tell us, Pete, what's on the right-hand side of that?
So on the right hand is his arms. And so you can see on the left the hand difference, and also see if you look at the bone density in the arms, you see the difference. And maybe you can see my pointer up there. You can see the difference in the bone density on both the arm and the hand on the dominant side.
I mean, it's almost like just the bone mass for his right arm, it might be double. I mean, I'm just guessing just from looking at it, but the diameter is substantially increased. I imagine the density is also increased.
Absolutely. And you'll see this next slide, it's the tip of the iceberg. But this is so visual, but it's perfect because, you can do studies with hundreds of people and argue over the data, this and that. This is the same guy. Same
right.
Physiology, same endocrinology, every pre-existing issue, it's right there. And it's over a long period of time. Now, this next slide, Mike, is one of 3 slides that has a yellow background. And the reason I put the yellow background is I really want these to be the take-home slides, okay? And so if we look at the skeleton system, we think of it, it's an organ system, so every bone is an organ, and together forms a skeletal organ system. We think of it as structural. And it was funny, the other day, I was with a 30-year friend of mine, orthopedic fellowship trained spine surgeon. And I asked him, what's the primary role of the skeleton? And even he said, it holds you up. And I had fun with, we were having fun, but I said, no, it's really not. The primary function of bone is metabolic, not structural. And let me back that up. Bones produces stem cells. So you can call them liquids and solids. The blood cells are called hemopoetics. And those blood cells are our red blood cells for oxygen transport and our white blood cells for our immune system. So those are pretty important.
Yes.
And, I had speculated in COVID that this would help COVID patients. And it turned out to be very much true. We have doctors that have validated that as patients themselves. And FLCCC has put JUVENT on their protocols as a third line defense. This is where it belongs. And I've spent a lot of time with Dr. Corey and Dr. Merrick, and they've reviewed the literature quite well, but also have noticed it clinically.
Oh, that's great.
The other group of cells that the bone produces are I call them the structural cells, or they're called mesenchymals. Okay, these stem cells are our source for 5 things: bone, muscle, fat, cartilage, and connective tissue. There may be a few more that are under investigation, but those are the ones right now. And that looks a lot like a joint, doesn't it?
Yes.
So we think that's one of the reasons so many people with joint pain get so much relief from JUVENT, because these stem cells are what are replacing our supply of cells. I mean, cells die, come and go, but they have to be produced and made. And we have a net loss. Well, you end up with pain. The other thing is those stem cells are known anti-inflammatories. So when somebody has inflammation, and guess what? There's 5 types of arthritis. They all end with an itis. That means inflammation. And so that's a pretty easy to connect those dots. But we'll find, I'll show you in a paper.
But I just want to point out,
Sure,
for those watching, it may be counterintuitive that micro-impact treatment can actually result in reduced inflammation, because a lot of people might think if something's inflamed and then you're pushing kinetic energy through it, it's going to cause it to be more inflamed. But you're just explaining the mechanism why the opposite is often true.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's the difference between impact and micro-impact, because the body can handle large impact loads, but they're always delivered at low frequency. But it actually puts them to use. But different tissues respond differently. And the bone is extremely resilient, but it's also extremely sensitive. But the rest of the body, starting with cartilage, doesn't really like it. And it becomes a mixed bag. And so that's really one of the differences between impact and micro-impact.
Okay.
And the animal studies have shown us, and in humans, that there's 46% more stem cells of this type produced. And that's mind-blowing. Everyone's trying to go get stem cell treatments with an injection. I think the body's a little better at figuring out what type of cells to make and where they go.
Wait a minute, you're saying that on the JUVENT plate, people's own bodies have been clinically shown to produce 46% more stem cells?
Yes.
What duration? Daily? For how long? What's necessary?
The animal studies, I'll show you that in a moment.
Oh, okay.
From it. And they've proved that number comes from the animal study. In the humans, they found it to be increased. And I don't have that level of specificity, but it's significantly bigger.
Okay.
Back to bone's functions. Bone does our mineral and lipid storage to keep our heart pumping at the right rate. And the other one that's a huge game changer is bone is essentially a member of the endocrine system. And the endocrine system is how our body manages itself. It's the communication system. And so when we hear diabetics telling us my insulin management gets easier, when people with RLS say I don't have RLS as bad anymore, men telling us they get their erections back, those are all hormonal issues. And you start to dig into it, you find, hey, these dots can be connected. Now, the hormonal system is extremely complicated, and we'll study that for 100 years. So to say we know everything, we don't. But at the same time, the treatment can be used because it's low risk, it's low cost, and it doesn't displace any other therapies. And those are the three things that require, the big expensive $1 million studies.
That's a really good point, is that this is something people can use without a surgical intervention, obviously. You just stand on the plate for a few minutes a day. There are no contraindications for any medication or supplements that you might already be on, right? So you don't have to change that.
Correct.
As long as you can stand on this plate for a few minutes at a time, you can use it. And, the other thing that people forget, I know somebody who just went through spinal surgery, and it's brutal. It's brutal. And at any age. And recovering from spinal surgery, this woman I know has spent 6 weeks trying to walk again and is optimistic that it went well. Like that's the good recovery. 6 weeks trying to walk again, and she can with a walker. But spinal surgery is absolutely brutal. I'm not saying that I'm not saying this can, replace surgery in every condition, not saying that at all, but it's something that people can look into that requires no interventions, no scarring, no anesthesia, no risk of dying on the operating table from trying this.
Yeah, and it's actually even more synergistic than that, Mike, because, there are people who have an orthopedic issue and are considering a total joint replacement. And, we'll say, look, why don't you try the JUVENT? You don't have to cancel your surgery, but try the JUVENT for prehab, pre-rehabilitation.
Yeah. Because,
the stronger you go into a surgery, the better off you are.
That's right.
And what we see, people go, well, I feel a lot better. Maybe I'll just postpone my surgery a little bit. Well, maybe I can push that off a little bit. And it may be a year or two later that they end up getting the joint replaced, if ever. And so we're not the panacea, but it's an amazing therapy. Why not try it? And even if they do the surgery, it's a great rehab tool to help wound healing. And, most orthopedic surgeries require a fusion. So even most spinal surgeries that aren't decompressive, if they're fusing, it's fusing two bones together like you would a broken bone.
Right.
And we have patients, and I have a series of x-rays of a cervical fusion, which is the most common fusion. Doctors, that's the most common spinal fusion there is. They do them like a dentist would fill a cavity. And the person used JUVENT. It was a good friend of ours. I used to sell spinal implants with him. And he got on the JUVENT, and we looked at his x-rays, and we told the doctor exactly what we were doing. I've shown his x-rays to 50 to 100 spine surgeons. And they look at the x-ray and say, that looks like a 3 to 6 month or 18-month x-ray. When I tell them it's 6 weeks, they just don't believe me.
Wow.
But we have all the medical records. So as far as, it being a tool for prehab or rehab, and even if you need the surgery, it's still a great therapy to have there. And, even if I replace the bone, the rest of the skeletal system, I want to preserve it. So it makes all the sense in the world.
And let me mention too, orthopedic surgeons, they want to work with patients, even if you're doing, let's say, a hip replacement surgery. Well, they have to attach the new hip to your existing bones. And in order to do that, you need bone density. And I know orthopedic surgeons, they hate it when they open up a patient and the bones are soft. A sedentary lifestyle person, typically an elderly person with very mushy almost bones. How do you screw into that, the new parts? Like, how does it stay attached? And then what about the bone? What about the healing that happens around the attachment points? I'm not using the right technical terms, but an orthopedic surgeon wants somebody to come in with high bone density that's going to have a more successful procedure.
Absolutely. I've been literally in thousands of spine surgeries, and the skeletal density will vary between oak would be, the best, and down to styrofoam.
Oh my.
And and it's a nightmare for the surgeon because they, are these screws going to hold up? And on a total joint replacement, you have that metal bone interface that has to incorporate.
Right.
And, we had one orthopedic surgeon who wanted his patients on a JUVENT literally in the hospital next day post-op.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's a synergistic effect. And so, but the interesting part about it is if we were able to take all of our bones and replace them with metal, we'd be absolutely unbreakable. but we would be dead in 10 minutes.
Right. You would lose all those other metabolic functions.
The point is, the bone's real job is metabolic, not structural.
Right.
And so if we do need the shortcut with a total joint or something that's great. But let's still take care of the rest of the skeletal system because that's its real job. Exactly.
Okay. All right. Let's move along. Sorry, I've been interrupting you, but we've got like little over 10 minutes.
Okay. Then we'll have to really go because I appreciate the interruptions. This is an example of bone's chemical conversation with the rest of the body. This slide's way over my head, but you get the point. And what I try to tell people is if you want to be healthy without your skeleton getting what it needs, good luck.
Right.
All right. Another yellow slide. Very important. I'm an engineer, and engineers, when they get it over their head, which I do in biology, we go to energy because if we do that accounting, we know we're going to come up with where we all fit. Chemically, we know we need air, water, and food. That's obvious. But what's a little less conspicuous, Mike, is we need mechanical energy. And that comes in two subcomponents, force and movement. So an astronaut tells us what it is. When we have no force, they lose bone at horrific rates. A bedridden person, they're not long for this world. There's no movement. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We've only known or agreed upon for the last 100 years that food is broken into subcomponents, fat, proteins, and carbs. And we wouldn't think of a diet that didn't incorporate that. And the micronutrients is where the vitamins and minerals are, and most of those discoveries are less than 50 years old. Well, it turns out force is not as simple. Today, we know it needs impact and non-impact. And just like fat, protein, carbs, those are non-interchangeable, fundamental daily requirements. Now, that's a really important point. That's not a treatment. That's a fundamental daily requirement. And that's JUVENT. So people ask who needs JUVENT. My answer is kind of, yeah. And most people are impact deficient. I call it mechanopenia because they fear impact or they're sedentary or for whatever reason. I've met pro athletes that lack impact because they're exercising and ignoring that requirement for the bone. And so that's where JUVENT is. And that means it's more than a treatment. It's addressing a fundamental requirement. Is there any questions there, Mike?
Well, what about rebounding like a mini trampoline? Does that count as impact, or is the forces are too gradual?
It'd be a little bit of both.
I see.
Yeah, it would be very inefficient, but every bounce, sure, that'd be one impact. JUVENT's doing about 32 to 37 impacts per second. So.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
And also, when I use JUVENT, I always feel there's a warmth, an internal warmth that begins to happen. Because I always use it in the morning, usually right after I wake up. And so, the body's not really moving that much. I get on the JUVENT, get going, and within a few minutes, I start to feel a sense of warmth. Is that, do a lot of people experience that?
Yeah, that's circulation. What's happening is there's a very well-described phenomena of the muscle, the balanced muscles. Okay, there's a fiber type that deals with, with our balance. Those balance muscles are stimulated every time the platform moves. And so that activation is clinically relevant in a couple indications. One is balance improvement, because it's like older people, their balanced muscle fibers aren't functioning properly. And so JUVENT is like having a personal trainer work on those. The secondary effect is that promotes a lot of lymphatic pumping, or a lot of mobility. And so we see people's feet, and I have a few pictures I'll show you, how their feet are just transformed from big, fat, swollen lower limb edema to like a different person.
Wow.
So that's part of what you're feeling on that.
Okay. And, I also want to mention, I'm very active. I walk, I train, I lift weights, I work with animals. I'm a hands-on guy around the ranch doing a lot of heavy things, and I still find benefit from JUVENT. So, it seems like even people who consider themselves to be quite active, as I do, can still receive benefits. Is that fair?
It is, because we get a lot of users that are pro football players and pro tennis players. And what happens there is they're not having a shortage of impact, so to speak, but they're kind of getting the wrong type. And it's type that cause inflammation. And so what we're doing is we're providing micro-impact, which is restorative. And so they're not dealing with a gross deficiency. And they're using it as a supplement to help. It's like a saltwater swimmer still needs to drink fresh water, even though he's surrounded by it.
Right.
And so they're using it with a little bit different mechanism of action. But I don't ever had a pro athlete not use it for more than 2 weeks and not stay using it. And we've actually had to now build portable platforms so they can travel away with it on the away game.
Okay, makes sense. All right. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead. Problem. I see you've got the next slide.
And it's a yellow slide. It's the last yellow slide.
Okay.
So basically, if you look at a vitamin, now a vitamin has 3 fundamental characteristics. It's required for normal metabolism, it's found in nature, and it's always a supplemental component. We don't have vitamin C trees, we have orange trees, grape trees, fruit trees. Now, if I take that and I juxtapose that with what is a exercise, well, an exercise is 3 components. I have movement and 2 types of force. So if I merge those 2 concepts together and take that force component and synthesize it to where it's easier, then it's literally a vitamin of exercise. It's mechanical, not chemical. It has the same dosing, the same response, excuse me, and the same retention. And this is a term I invented, and I've talked to 100 MDs, NDs, and PhDs in a combination of them. They've all agreed, yeah, that's technically accurate. That's a very accurate description. And so the other question is, when do we need it? Well, when do we need a vitamin? Our whole life. It's part of life. And so it kind of goes to answer the age population, because we don't stop needing exercise at any point in our life. That's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the minute you stop moving, you just start dying.
Absolutely.
I mean,
see, the thing about it is we're electrical beings, we're chemical beings, but we're also mechanical beings. And every cell in the body is mechanosensitive. Mm-hmm. And they either use that as a productive force or destructive. And what the researchers have done, it was a team of researchers for 20 years, they found exactly how to dial that in. And that's why it's called micro-impact, because you can do all good without the bad. And when you study the biology and the mechanics, it's a lot to it. It's not a simple discovery.
All right, makes sense. Let's keep moving forward.
This is a slide showing the stem cell achievements of the animals on JUVENT versus not. So if you look in the lower left corner, those are the stem cells that become our bone, muscle, fat, cartilage, and connective tissue, 46% more. Mike, you had mentioned feeling kind of a warmth on the unit. That's circulation. And as I mentioned earlier, it's promoting circulation. And the mechanism of action is fascinating. So when our blood system uses other muscle activity to squeeze blood vessels, push things forward, and then it locks it in place and just keeps advancing forward. So that's happening with JUVENT, both with blood and for lymph. And our lymph system is really the kind of the garbage collection and immune response highway. And it's just about as involved as the blood system in terms of where it is, but it doesn't have a heart. It relies on this exclusively. And having these people on it makes a huge difference. Let me show you a couple pictures of people's difference between the flow and their extremities. This guy on the top left came to my house looking for a JUVENT for his joint pain. I looked at his feet and I said, I got to get a picture of this. Those won't look the same in 4 weeks. Sure enough, he sent me a picture 4 weeks later. That's it to the right. These lower pictures are from NYU. They're doing a study on lower limb edema. You can see the difference a few weeks makes on that patient.
Wow.
This is one of the top right is a friend of mine who sold spinal implants with. He broke his leg, and he was 3 months post-op, still keeping his foot elevated. I looked at it. I said, get on a JUVENT. He actually had one. He goes, you think it'll help? I laughed. So 8 days later, I had him send me another picture. Look at the difference. I mean, it just goes on and on. And so that's a really fun thing to see people turn around.
Yeah, that's a pretty gnarly scar he's got there too. I hate to know what happened to him.
Well, his foot went in a hole, his body went forward, everything got separated.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. Poor guy.
Okay, well, this reinforces recovery.
It does.
The importance of it. So, okay, what else do we need to know?
So basically, there's a lot of reasons we don't get impact. And, these are all a little counterintuitive, but some of them are actually just amazing. And I'm going to focus on the last one, and it's incapacity. And what happens, imagine if we got older and somebody said, you can't run and catch animals, no meat for you. You can't climb trees, no fruit for you. You can't get water, no water for you. Here's a wheelchair, just we wouldn't do that. But that's exactly what we do with Micro-Impact. Can't walk a lot? Here's a cane. Don't like that? Here's a walker. Why do you even need to walk at all? Here's a wheelchair. And so these people have their second most important organ system basically going dormant.
Right.
And of course they're going to accelerate the decline. When we see people get on Juvent, they're making huge steps back. My mom was really that stage 3 right there. That was 12 years ago. She's back on stage, whatever the one at first image in this cascade. And so that is just a huge audience. And it's just the one that, when I say we can add 5 years to people's health span, that's why. I know it. I see it. I don't have a study to say that. That's Pete Simonson's estimation, but I think it's an underestimate, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense.
Now, back to vitamins. And so we'll show this. I show this to doctors. These are diseases that none of the doctors have ever treated. Okay. You won't find many doctors who are experts in scurvy or rickets.
All vitamin deficiencies.
Exactly. And that's the point I try to tell them. When the vitamin was discovered, that a deficiency was addressed, these diseases went away. And in my opinion, the vitamin of exercise we're providing is doing the same thing to many other these things we just think are normal. And that's what I try to get to the doctors. This is a list of 13 indications that all can be treated with a drug. And you know what? It's dehydration. And the point I'm making is imagine someone suffering from all of those and no one asks them, are you drinking water? And so you're trying to chase your tail without addressing a fundamental daily requirement. And that's where Juvent fits. If you're going to heal something, address deficiencies and remove toxins. That's the number one thing. And so this is most people are underserved with impact loading. Okay, Mike, a really very important point is the body has limits of what type of impact it likes. Juvent is not the same as a whole body vibration plate that you find at Costco, Amazon, or even pay $10,000 for. It's using Micro-Impact. It's very different. The body has a range of impact loading that is pure good. If you get beyond that, it starts to become destructive. We know that from inflammatory cytokines. It's not that it's not doing some good, because the bone can take it. It's the rest of the body you have to worry about. And it's very important that people understand that and not get on these high energy plates. I'm an engineer. I can tell you, if you can see it moving, it's too much energy. And we're starting to get documented cases of detached retinas and cranial damage from people getting on these high energy plates. We knew it in theory. We're seeing it in reality. So it's important to understand Juvent is not whole body vibration. And there's a very, very big difference.
Okay. All right. Well stated. I haven't seen that presentation before, but it sure is fascinating. I know you have a lot more to share, but we are out of time for today. Let me just mention, folks, go to juvent.com to check it out. Again, as a disclaimer, we don't earn anything off your purchase, but the Juvent company is a sponsor of Brighteon.tv, and this is a product that I have used since 2016. So 7 years I've been using this myself, and it is, I can't say enough about it, and I've recommended it to a large number of people. So thank you, Pete, for joining us today. It's been fascinating.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks so much.
Okay. All right. We'll talk again. Take care now. All right. And thank you for joining me today. All of you watching, again, juvent.com is the website, and it's something to check out. And feel free to repost this interview if you found it valuable, or if you know somebody that this can help. Send them a link to this interview on Brighteon.com or the other platforms where we post, including BitChute and Rumble. Thanks for watching today. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon. Take care. Thank you for your support of Brighteon.com. We've got a major sale event coming up. It's the Christmas holiday sale. It begins December 14th, which is a Thursday, and we put together some really amazing bundles for you. You can see all those specials once the page goes live at healthrangerstore.com/Christmas. And let me just go through some of these. We have the Beauty Gift Pack, which has collagen peptides, hydrate elementals, detox foot pads, jojoba oil, and much more. These are all discounted substantially off of their normal retail price. We have the Alpha Bundle Gift Pack, which has maca root powder. It's got saw palmetto. This is mostly for men. First aid gel tube and turmeric root powder and other items in there as well. We have the freeze-dried Superfruit Fiesta Gift Pack. And this gives you a combination of freeze-dried beet juice powder, blueberry powder, and superfruit C powder, which is a combination of multiple fruits that are very high, not only in vitamin C, but also anthocyanins, by the way. That's also discounted. Again, just go to healthrangerstore.com/Christmas. And then we've got the Go Nuts for Christmas gift pack, which has almonds, cashews, and macadamia nuts in a special package, doubling up on the cashews. And these are whole pieces of cashews, very high quality, laboratory tested, including being tested for aflatoxins, which are a very common toxic class of compounds that grows on nuts. It's a mold that produces a toxin. So we do all the testing in our lab to make sure that you get clean and certified organic products. And then finally, we have the freeze-dried fruit gift pack, which has organic strawberries and mangoes and pineapples all together in also a special discount. You can check out all these bundles once again at healthrangerstore.com/Christmas. It all goes live at 11 a.m. Central on Thursday, December 14th, and it runs until Sunday night at midnight. That's when you can take advantage of these great discounts on the special packs that we've put together for you. And we thank you for your support, because without you, well, we couldn't fund this platform, and we couldn't bring you the kind of interviews and podcasts and free speech conversations that you enjoy here on Brighteon.com. So thank you for your support, and thank you for shopping at healthrangerstore.com/Christmas. Merry Christmas to you all. Take care. A global reset is coming, and that's why I've recorded a new 9-hour audiobook. It's called The Global Reset Survival Guide. You can download it for free by subscribing to the naturalnews.com email newsletter, which is also free. I'll describe how the monetary system fails. I also cover emergency medicine and first aid and what to buy to help you avoid infections. So download this guide. It's free. It's my gift to you, simply because I want like-minded people to survive.